Hello, and I'm back. As I mentioned before, I was going to talk about a little about I've heard it called three things: the War of Triple Alliance, which I think is what the Brazilians call it, the Paraguayan War, and the Brazilian War. Now, this war it's interesting because it happened in 1864, and something to think about too. Like it's also around time where there was a rebellion of Brazil from Portugal, and a lot of different things happening. You have to go back and look at the Monroe Doctrine, where we said we would prevent Europeans from meddling in the affairs of Europe, and this may have to do. This may not have happened, or there might have been a situation if Portugal had more control. But what ended up happening now, looking at a couple of different sources, one is that the war was Paraguay and Brazil. I think from what I read is that there was a very brief summary in one book that spoke about it. But what was said, the cause of the war, Brazil was part of the Portuguese possession until 1822. Okay, so and it declared its independence. Emperors Pedro I and Pedro II had frequent trouble not only with the Republic movement in Brazil itself, but with neighboring states with whom they were constantly at war. In 1855, Pedro II sent a squadron to Paraná. Paraná is one of the states in Brazil, to adjust several questions outstanding of the Republic of Paraguay. Although certain rights were gained to Brazil, the government of Paraguay threw every obstacle in the way to prevent a settlement. So, in 1864, Lopez, the ambitious dictator of Paraguay, without declaring war, captured a Brazilian vessel and invaded Brazil and Argentina. Uruguay joined them in a triple alliance in defense against Paraguay. So it's interesting because Paraguay is a landlocked country, and the only way that they have any access to the ocean is to go through Argentina and maybe part of Uruguay as well. So there might have been some tensions with that. I also heard recently there was talk about a war with Paraguay and Argentina. And I was surprised to hear that. And, it could happen. But one thing to think about is the United States becomes more focused on European countries and has difficulties with all these wars that they have to deal with, the more trouble that we could possibly have in South America. Because a lot of these things were sort of somewhat regulated by the United States. Not to say that there's an extensive amount, but one thing to mention is that European countries still come. A lot of these European countries that claim they care so much about the Amazon, like France, Norway. I was surprised to hear Norway does it, but a lot of these countries will go up into the Amazon and clear cut these forests, cut down trees, and just clear out an area without replanting, and they will transport these trees back to their countries for wood. But at the same time, they're going to sit there and complain about Brazil not doing enough to protect the Amazon, and they allow the people within their country to break these laws without without punishing them. So you have these problems now. Looking at another source, so the war stemmed from territorial disputes and Paraguay's desire to assert its dominance in the region. Paraguay, under the leadership of President Franco Solano Lopez, sought to expand its territory by seizing land from neighboring countries. So Paraguay found itself isolated as neighboring countries formed an alliance against it. So Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay formed a triple alliance in 1865 to counter Paraguayan aggression. So the War of Triple Alliance, that's what they call it in Brazil, as far as I know. And like you might, if you look doing the research on it, the Paraguay War or the Brazil War. And so, military campaign, the war saw significant military campaigns, including battles fought on land and naval engagements on rivers like the Paraná and Paraguay River. Paraguay's military, thought initially formidable, was eventually overwhelmed by the combined forces of the Triple Alliance. And this is where every male in the population was killed. The Paraguay War was one of the deadliest conflicts in South American history, resulting in immense loss of life and devastation. In Paraguay, in particular, suffered catastrophic casualties and widespread destruction of its infrastructure. And so they had to import people from men from other countries in order because there were just women there. So the war ended in defeat of Paraguay and signing of a treaty of Assumption in 1870. Paraguay lost significant territory to Argentina and Brazil and was forced to pay reparations. The country's economy and infrastructure were left in ruins, and it took decades to recover from the aftermath of the conflict. So it had a far-reaching effect on the economy there and other things. If you go to Paraguay, it looks a little devastated. There's some interesting things about Paraguay. It's a little bit of a frontier, and it's a little bit of a wild place. I've heard different stories about it, but I've heard it's safe there. But this thing you need to understand, like if you like everyone's armed there, and so of course there's crime everywhere, but you don't have this type of crime that you have in Brazil. But the thing too is, like, if you go into the Amazon area, everyone there is armed too, but the laws are different there too. Like a friend of mine lives in the Amazon, and he said, like, among the Indians, they have some very unique concepts of their own laws. But one time, one of the Indians in Amazon did something that he was not supposed to do, and down here they use the term Indians. So for indigenous people. So one of them was told, "Don't ever come back here again," and he left the town. 10 years later, he came back, and they mutilated his body, and they sent pictures of it everywhere to show everybody not to do what this guy did. So whatever he did, it really pissed off the locals, and they told him never come back. And you read history, you see these things happen a lot in history, and maybe kind of the same thing. But people were told, go away, don't come back. Especially, you might see this with the sons of King David. I don't know if it was Absalom or I know Absalom was one of them, but it might have been the other brother. And he was the oldest brother, and King Solomon took over and basically told him not to come back, or not to do, kind of in exile, kind of like this guy. And either he came back or he did something that he wasn't supposed to do, which ticked off Solomon, and of course that put an end to him. And these things happen, so it's kind of like who has control of the law. Hopefully there's a balance of power, and that's one of the good things about federalism is how it balances the power out. Because if you give too much power to one group of people, it's not a good thing. But anyway, let me get away from politics here. So this is an area that I enjoy driving through, except for the traffic. But if you look at the palm trees are really, really nice. It's sort of a nice scenic view. And it's not too bad. We're getting kind of closer to the area. So there's a lot of tourist areas, a lot of places where people go. If you go maybe a couple hundred yards to the left, you'll hit the beach. And to the right, there's a lot of open land out there. I think a lot of farmlands and other things. This is sort of a sandy area, so there's probably a lot of glades out here too. It might not be the best place for a lot of different types of crops. There might be certain things that grow here, but it's hard to say exactly what's going to be the best thing to grow. But there are areas where they have salt. Like say for example, they have like big open areas where they have salt laid out, and like separated from the ocean. So it's sort of like a low area, and the salt water comes in there, and they're able to dry it up and create salt. So that's it. I'll get more into some of these stories in the next one, and talk to you later. Thank you for joining me on this Brazilian adventure. If you enjoyed exploring Brazil with me, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to Lost in Brazil for more exciting content, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts and questions or suggestions in the comments below. I love hearing from you. And until next time, obrigado and safe travels.